Welcome back, my little Kemptville kittens. It's Leah again. Yeah, they couldn't afford Ross Matthews either. We're working on a budget, okay? Speaking of budgets, we understand that right now, in these uncertain times, you might not have a lot of extra money to throw at drag. And leaving the house to shop, that might not be in the cards either. So we want you to get creative. Go into your closet, use something you haven't used in years in a new way. Borrow from a friend. I see you looking at my sequin curtain. No, you can't have my sequin curtain. However you drag, we want to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. So don't worry if you don't have a lot of money to throw at this. Throughout history, drag queens have gotten really creative with not a lot of money. So find your signature look, but don't break the bank to do it. So let's get down to it. Okay, Dragly scholars, I'm gonna start simple. Let's talk about the word drag. Now, drag has been around for centuries. Some people think that it actually started around the 13th century with theater productions. I was a theater major in college. I know, it's so hard to tell. Lo, she is one of this confederacy. Now I perceive that they have conjoined all three to fashion this false sport in spite of me. Speaking of Shakespeare, when I was in school, I was taught that drag was a Shakespearean term for dressed as girl, because in Shakespeare's times, not a lot of women did theater, so all of the female roles had to be played by men dressed as women. So it makes sense that they would use dressed as girl as the acronym. But it turns out that it's probably actually a backronym. Backrolls? A backronym is actually an acronym that is applied to a word after the fact. So although it fits really well, it's likely that dressed as girl was used after the fact. And a lot of scholars think that the term actually came from the fact that skirts drag on the ground. So when actors would cross the stage, their costumes would drag behind them. The word drag first appeared in print around 1870, with the term drag queen first appearing around 1941. And it's likely a Polari term. Polari is a form of gay language or slang that was used in England in the 1900s. Though the original origin of the word might not be completely traceable, the definition of drag is a constantly evolving art. Distilling it down to its very basics, drag is a form of gender expression that explores both femininity and masculinity through the lens of performance. It's an art form that is used by artists of all gender expressions and in varying levels. In other words, drag is very far-reaching and for everyone. Mainstream media is certainly brimming with drag these days. Ooh, hold on, I just have to check my Drag Warriors pool. In fact, some of our contestants might even be the future of drag. So exciting for you. But before we get to the future, we've got to look back to the past. So grab your pens and pencils. Do people use pencils anymore? Let's get to work.
Long before RuPaul ever sashayed down a runway, there were pioneering queens like Julian Eltinge, a vaudeville performer who took her drag straight to the bank. Her performances gained so much popularity that she became the highest paid actor in the world, surpassing Charlie Chaplin. Cut to Prohibition, where underground speakeasies gave birth to a drag circuit known as the pansy craze. I know, it's not the most woke term, but it carried the love of drag into the post-Prohibition era. This craze led to an underground scene of gay establishments that continued far after Prohibition was lifted and gave a stage and income to mid-century drag performers. We can't talk about drag without talking about ballroom. Have you ever seen Madonna's Vogue? Wonder where she got those iconic moves? They came from ballroom culture, a competitive underground art form that came to popularity in Harlem and Washington Heights and was started by Black and Latina trans women. This became a stage for queer people of color to express their gender and also challenge the ideals of white gay culture, which they were largely excluded from. Ballroom icons like Jose Extravaganza, Willie Ninja, and Crystal LaBeija have inspired so much mainstream drag terminology and culture. Fun fact, did you know the term death drop comes from the ballroom move to dip? And ballroom practitioners don't actually use the former term. Comprised of houses, or chosen families, the balls are a celebration of Black and Latin queer culture. Ballroom has flourished in recent years, with new houses forming across the globe. If you'd like to learn more, I would highly recommend checking out documentaries like The Queen and Paris is Burning, both available on Netflix, and more recent shows like Pose, which features the largest transgendered cast ever on a major network platform. And Legendary, a ballroom competition show that proves ballroom is definitely still inspiring mainstream culture and media. While the balls were coming to prominence in the 70s and 80s, there was another queen reaching cult-level status. Her name? Divine, a queen once described by People magazine as the drag queen of the century. Remember the 2019 Met Ball theme, camp? Camp is described as an aesthetic style and sensibility that regards something as appealing because of its bad taste and ironic value. Divine is definitely camp. She joined forces with filmmaker John Waters to bring camp culture to cult-level status with movies like Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and the original Hairspray. No, not the Travolta one. Her aesthetic has inspired many modern-day drag queens and kings, and led to competition shows like Dragula, which last season crowned their first drag king, Landon Sider. Speaking of drag kings, we have to mention performers like Stormé de la Verre. She is remembered as a gay civil rights icon and entertainer who performed and hosted at the Apollo Theater and Radio City Music Hall. From the mid-1950s through the 1960s, Ms. de la Verre was the MC of the Jewel Box Revue, the first racially integrated drag revue in North America. Stormé was the only king to perform in this show. She held a number of leadership positions in the Stonewall Veterans Association, and she worked for much of her life as an MC, singer, bouncer, bodyguard, and volunteer street patroller, where she was known as the guardian of the lesbians in the village. Beyond her work with the LGBTQ+ community, she performed at fundraisers for women who suffered from domestic violence and abuse. When asked years later about the Stonewall riots, she was stated as saying, "It was a rebellion. It was an uprising. It was a civil rights disobedience. It wasn't no damn riot." I highly recommend checking out dragkinghistory.com for a more comprehensive look at Stormé and many other incredible kings. Pride and drag are not all fun and glitter. Pride is a protest, and drag performers have stood on the front line of LGBTQ+ rights and protests from time. The Stonewall riots are traditionally thought of as the spark of gay liberation, but did you know that there were many, many events that led up to Stonewall? Events like the Cooper's Donut riots in 1959, Dewey's Restaurant Sit-In in 1965, Compton's Cafeteria Riot in 1966, the Mattachine Society Sip-In, also in 1966, and the Black Cat Tavern Riot in 1967. Drag performers have participated in, led, and helped protests to this day. Speaking of Stonewall, did you know that people across the gender spectrum participate in drag? It was two legendary trans women, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, that helped lead the post-Stonewall gay liberation movement. Famously, Marsha, when asked about her gender or what the P stood for in her name, would say, "Pay it no mind," a line later used by Mama RuPaul in her 2014 chart-topping song, Sissy That Walk. Johnson and Rivera went on to form the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, later revised as the Street Transgender Action Revolutionaries. STAR offered services and advocacy for homeless queer youth and sex workers, and fought for the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act in New York. SONDA prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in employment, housing, public accommodations, education, credit, and the exercise of civil rights. Marsha performed with the drag troupe Hot Peaches throughout the 70s and was an AIDS activist with ACT UP. Although Marsha's life was tragically cut short, she died under suspicious circumstances in 1992, Sylvia continued to fight for LGBTQ+ and specifically trans rights. She famously said, "Hell hath no fury like a drag queen scorned." Sylvia resurrected STAR in 2001 and fought for the New York City Transgender Rights Bill. For more on Marsha and Sylvia, I really love the documentary by the same name as Marsha's popular catchphrase, "Pay it no mind." Did you know that we have some fierce local drag performers in Canada? Queens like Michelle DuBarry, who once held the title of the world's oldest performing drag queen. This title was later awarded to Oregon Queen Darcel, who is a year older than DuBarry. At 89 and 90 years young, I think we can all agree that these two queens are an incredible part of drag herstory. DuBarry participated in some of the first ever Pride celebrations in Toronto and continues to perform as a drag queen, including at bar shows and charity functions for causes such as HIV/AIDS awareness and Gilda's Club. DuBarry served as a Grand Marshal of Toronto's Pride Parade in 2007, and it's pretty great that she's our hometown gal. Speaking of gals, There are lots of female-identifying drag performers as well. There's an incredible local group, the Drag Coven, led by Canadians Courtney Conkers and Jamie Queen West, that have a large social media following where they chronicle current, modern-day drag in an accessible way for larger audiences to access and follow. They're currently working on documenting online drag performances from performers across all spectrums and across the globe, and they're outspoken about bigotry and misogyny in the drag world and beyond. You go, girls!
I know I'm throwing a lot of information your way, but don't worry, I'm going to provide links and references at the end of this video so you can keep learning on your own. Some great references that are right in your backyard: the North Grenville Public Library, Kemptville branch. The library is open. But like the actual library, I'm not going to read you or anything. And also Glad Day Bookstore. It's based in Toronto, and it's the largest and oldest queer-owned bookstore in North America. I think that's really, really cool. And they ship all over Canada, so support local and learn about some amazing queer history. We have some amazing seminars coming up on makeup, on hair, on finding your inner drag persona, and Kemptville Pride will be posting them all throughout the month. We've got some hashtags for you to use so that you can share your excitement about this show. So it's hashtag kvilledragshow and hashtag Kemptville Pride. Don't worry, I'll list them below. I hope you enjoyed this HERstory lesson. I'm Leah. Keep learning, keep researching. We can't wait to see your amazing drag looks. Remember, your deadline to submit is June 12th.